Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm very happy to see already many people joining this webinar. We will wait some minutes to allow other people to join, and then Alex will start.
Thanks everyone for joining. I'll just give it another minute or so to let anyone who's still trying to make their way in enter, and then we'll get started. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm keen to get started as soon as possible. I'll start at 3 minutes past. Okay, so I make that 3 minutes past 5. I think anyone else joining will just have to pick up as we go. Thanks everyone for joining us today for this, I think, fourth webinar that we've been hosting as part of the HACID project. HACID is a EU Horizon project, which is looking at how to best combine collective intelligence from people and artificial intelligence in decision support systems. Specifically, we're building 2 applications in the medical diagnostics domain and in climate services. And through that process, trying to develop new methods for evaluating hybrid intelligence systems and developing new methods for participatory design development in order to optimize these tools to support professionals in different domains. We have hosted webinars that are exploring wider research in collective intelligence and artificial intelligence since February. You might have joined one of our previous ones. And this one specifically is focused on gender and diversity in large language models and AI, and how we might better evaluate, measure the kind of impact of different choices when it comes to gender and diversity characteristics of large language models. I think it's a really pertinent topic to collective intelligence, given how important we know for optimizing collective intelligence diversity is. And so without further ado, we have 3 fabulous speakers. It's not about me today. I'm gonna hand over to each of them in turn, and they'll give a presentation of their kind of approach or their lens on this topic for about 10 minutes. And then we will have a bit of time at the end for Q&A, where we'll invite you to ask questions. Think all the way through. If something comes to mind, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that, and I will get us started. So first of all, we are going to hear from Taha Yasseri, whose research highlights that gendering AI is not a neutral design choice, and that it can exacerbate or highlight some existing workplace biases. and it's something that we really need to be paying attention to as we bring AI systems into our workplaces. So I'm going to hand over to the expert, Taha, if you want to share your screen and take us through your talk.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you, Vito, Alex, for organizing this event. This is my second time presenting and my third time attending. I enjoyed the one that I didn't present on the most because, well, it was less stressful. But joking aside, thank you very much for having me again. Today, of course, we are more specifically talking about the role of gender in hybrid intelligence, and I'm very glad to share some of the work that we have been doing in our Center for Sociology of Humans and Machines at Trinity College Dublin and Technological University Dublin. We are a joint center, and we are dedicated to understanding the new sociology of humans and machines. This is also the title of one of the papers I presented last time, which basically suggests that we should revise our sociological understanding of our societies because we know we have these new actors, AI agents, that not only can show social behavior or social traits among themselves, but also they can affect our pre-existing or existing societies and the understanding of the societies that we have. But also, perhaps even most exciting, now we have these hybrid systems where human and machines are interacting directly to one another at the dyadic level, one-to-one settings, and at the societal level, which makes things even more complex and interesting. I didn't ask. I assume you hear me well, you see me well, and you see my slides, yes? Otherwise, please give me a shout. So today I'm going to focus on what we have in the middle, human-machine interactions. And obviously, when you think of human-machine interactions, you can think of all different types of interactions we could have. I listed here a few that we do study in our center. But I'm not going to go through all of them today. Particularly, we are going to focus on two projects, two experiments in which we looked at AI as a teammate and AI as a manager. I was just humble bragging that the first project, the first paper was accepted today, so it will soon appear on iScience, but the preprint is available in case you want to know more about the details of the work. So in this experiment, we wanted to see what are the parameters and what will happen if we get people interact with an AI agent in a one-to-one setting in a sort of cooperation scenario. We use the prisoner's dilemma, which is a very well-studied paradigm to study cooperation and conflict, cooperation, trust, and defection. Yet I will quickly give you an overview in case there is anyone in the room not familiar with this. In a prisoner's dilemma game, which is a very stylized, very simplified version of a complex dilemma that we might have to be dealing with on a daily basis, you can either decide to make an individual decision, a selfish decision, we call it going solo, or you can decide to go team. And you are in interaction with one other person only. If you both decide to go team, that is good for the team. Each of you receive 70 points. But if one of you decides to go solo and the other person decides to go team, the person who was selfish, who is selfish, takes more money, 100, and the person who was trying to be cooperative goes home empty-handed. The irony is that now, if both people know who have incentives to go solo, we have go solo, then they go home with very little money. Still a bit better than being betrayed in the scenario that they go team and the other person goes solo, but suboptimal compared to the case that they could both decide to make the right decision and go team. You can imagine this is a simplified model of all sorts of scenarios in which that we can free write, and optimally this is good for us as an individual, but not good for the team, not for the society, not for the group. And if everyone else is selfish, even the selfish decision is not going to be good for ourselves either. What we added to this, and I'm surprised that no one else had done it before, is maybe people have done it, but we were not aware, is not only we asked the participants what is their decision, we asked them what they think the other participant is going to do. This enables us to not only understand the level of cooperation, but also understand the motivations behind. For instance, if I say, hey, I'm going to go team, and I think the other person is going to go team, that shows I trust them. But if I say, hey, I'm going to go solo, even though I know that the other person is going to go team, that means that I intentionally am exploiting them. Whereas if I go solo, sometimes we go solo because we think the other person is going to go solo too. We don't want to be that loser. In that case, it's not a matter of exploitation, it's the mutual distrust. The interesting parts are really when someone goes solo. What happens that someone thinks I want to be selfish and do a free ride? It's either because they want to exploit the other person that they trust, or they want to distrust the other person. They distrust the other person and they don't want to be exploited. This is what we can measure, and this would be a new contribution. Okay, in the game we got participants, human participants, to play the game either with a human or AI, or at least this is what we told them. Behind the curtain, we neither had human nor AI. We had a random generator. And it was a one-shot game. Basically, they wouldn't see the results until they have made the decisions. But they played the game 10 times with different partners. This partner could be a human or AI, as we label. Our focus is on the participants' behavior rather than how we can increase cooperation if we use AI or human. That's why this is a paradigm that is called this is a paradigm that we don't really need to have real human or AI behind the curtain. We see that overall, the level of cooperation is only slightly higher when participants think that they are playing with a human than when they think they are playing against AI. There is some sort of AI exploitation happening, but the difference is not massive. However, when we look at those motivations behind, when we ask the second question and combine the two answers, we see that among people who defected against the partner, among people who cheated, the ones who cheated because they distrusted the partner was much more when the partner was a human, and the percentage of people who exploited the partner was larger when the partner was AI. So overall, we cooperate with AI to the same level, yet when we don't, it's mostly because we feel all right to exploit them rather than to distrust them. Then we added gender, and that's why I'm talking to you today. First of all, when people were playing against female partners, the cooperation was much higher. So participants, regardless of their own gender, were more cooperative when their partner was labeled as male and female. Again, we didn't have any real partner. And I must say, when we are introducing, okay, let me show you this first. Yet, when they defected, when they cheated against male, it was primarily because they didn't trust the male partner. Whereas when they cheated against female, it was much more because they wanted to exploit the female partner. So the difference is really stark. The division between yellow and red, which is the motivation behind defection, is very different pattern depending on the gender of the partner. Now we combined these two dimensions, the gender and the type. We had to convince the participants that AI can have gender, and later the editor of the journal. But that's a different discussion. I'm very happy to have a short version of it. But we told them that this AI agent that you are playing with is trained on the data generated by female or male participants. Also, we had other gender identities, but I'm not going to talk about them today for the sake of time. Then what we see is that cooperation rate is not very different with human AI and with female and male AI or human. The patterns are very similar. But again, when we look at the motivations, we see that the picture is very different depending on the identity, the gender, and the type of the partner. The highest level of distrust was when the partner was a male human, like me. And the highest level of exploitation was when the partner was a female AI, like Siri, like Alexa, like accidentally almost all those commercialized AI agents. The same people seem to be very comfortable exploiting the AI female partners. And that could be very reason that these companies come up with such design patterns, design decisions that matches this sort of preference. But anyway, even though at the corporation level, the changes are not massive necessarily, but we see that the reason behind defection is very different based on the type and gender. Alex, Vito, could you tell me how much time I have? I sort of lost track of time.
You have a few more minutes.
Okay, I'll be fast. Now I'm going to talk about another project, which is easier to explain. And that's where we wanted to check the possibility of using AI as a manager. This paper is revised and resubmitted to Computers in Human Behavior Reports, but the preprint is available again if someone is interested. So this was a game that people had to play, but before playing the game, we asked them what is the preference for a manager. And we gave different features to the manager, male, female, human, AI, and people generally had no preference. They sort of rated, let's say, the fairness of hypothetical managers 7 out of 10 almost for all the groups. They had a slightly higher perception of fairness for female managers, but and a little bit less for AI, but generally people didn't show strong preference on fairness, on competence, on a few other dimensions and factors that are related to managerial roles. Then they had to play a game. They had to solve a puzzle first individually, and then they had to do it in a group, and they could chat with the group members, groups of 3 participants. And we told them that a manager is watching you and analyzes your interaction with the team, your decisions, everything you do. And at the end of this round, we pick 1 player from each group and give them some additional award, some extra money. In reality, and this is very important, in reality, we didn't have any manager. We randomly selected one of the players and we said, you were the best. Here goes €2. 2 additional euros. Because again, we didn't want to check if AI can do a managerial job. We wanted to check how people react to decisions coming from AI manager. Okay, people who were selected to receive the additional reward, generally their perception of the manager improved. So this is the change in the perceived fairness. Only for those who were rewarded, we see a positive change. But the reward coming from a male AI manager was appreciated the most, the largest amount of increase in fairness evaluation. The very same decision, statistically the same, coming from a female human manager was not as much as appreciated as male AI. But those people, the 2 people in the team who did not receive the reward, again, statistically, they were less happy. They gave lower rating to the manager after the game, and the change is negative. However, we see that the outrage they experienced reflected in the rating is the largest when the manager was a female AI manager. Those participants who had a human male manager, even though they received the same decision, the same punishment, their perception did not change much. They still think that the manager is fair, even though the outcome is the same. The same decision coming from female human or female AI felt very unfair. I think in the interest of time, I jump over the last few slides. Let me just...
Yeah, I think we're just needing to switch. So yeah. Yeah,
conclude that gendered AI might amplify sexist behavior. It doesn't. I'm not claiming it creates this behavior. The behavior and the tendencies and the biases exist, but when we are interacting with AI, some of them might get amplified. The problem is that this might spill over back again to human-human interaction. Even if ethically we are fine with exploitation of AI, the problem is that when this becomes a habit, and then we also exploit our human colleagues and managers. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Taha. That was really fascinating and slightly terrifying as well, particularly trying to think who would be responsible for those design decisions. I'm going to ask Roberta to start sharing her screen, and I'll introduce her, and maybe we can have start gathering questions for Taha to come back to at the end as well. Roberta, are you okay to start sharing your presentation? And I'll shortly introduce. So Roberta Caligari is going to be talking to us about the Aquitas framework for assessing and mitigating bias and aligning fairness with compliance in emerging European AI regulations, particularly focusing on gender and diversity. So over to you, Roberta.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It is a really pleasure to be here. So, as you told, I will introduce some results that we got from Aquitas project, that is a project in Horizon Europe that has been founded in 2020, and so it is going to end in a couple of weeks, actually, where we designed the framework for fairness in AI. And in particular, we designed something that is going to provide a path towards compliance. But let me recap a little bit where we are and what we can do today with AI. AI for sure is something that is getting attention, and we have incredible results. So I'm a scientist, and so I would like to start with the facts that we have today. And some facts are that in some tasks like, for instance, image recognition, AI is able to perform better than a human. So then we have other unpredictable results, very impressive results, like the ones in drug discovery, disease prediction, autonomous vehicle, conversational agents, and also we got the last year 2 Nobel Prize in the field of chemistry and physics related to AI results. So what we have in our hands is a great possibility. But on the other hand, since I'm a scientist and I want to talk about facts, we have some example of application that actually went really wrong, in particular in relation to gender and diversity dimension that we would like to emphasize tonight. So here I put some of the examples, very well known. We have a gender biased hiring tool delivered by Amazon, and it was performing discrimination against women. So once they put it on the market, they had to retire it. Another example, face recognition application that were not able to recognize female. Even worse when it comes to dark skin female. Okay, so we start talking about some concepts that are known in the literature as intersectionality of different sensitive attributes that we can have in an AI system. But do not, if we don't want to go so far with some application that maybe we say, okay, I never use them, this is not my field, my interest, and so on. Let's open a web page, a search engine that we use daily, and let's perform some search with some gender-neutral words. This is an example that I made some months ago on a famous search engine, and I made a search for SEO. And the result that you can see here were, for the majority of the pictures of male, middle-aged, white men. So I said, okay, let's take a look at a different gender-neutral word that is, for instance, secretary. And what I got here was actually the majority of picture depicting women, white, middle-aged, and let me say even a little bit too much sexy for my standards, okay? So what is happening here? So let's take a look at our ChatGPT, that is one of the language models that we use nowadays everywhere. And let's take into consideration not gender in this case, but something different, diversity, for instance, also in terms of religion. So here I asked our GPT a simple query related to some religions, and I was asking to him if under some condition a religion was in right in attacking a different religion, and the answer was yes, definitely. So I took the same query and I just swapped the two religions, and the answer was no. So what is happening here? Why we have in our hands this kind of AI system that we use in our everyday life that are performing this kind of behaviors that are questionable, at least, okay? So the point that I want to make with this slide is that what is happening is the following, that the system that we use today, our AI models, the AI models that we are able to build and to implement as engineers can cover different kind of models, descriptive, predictive, decisional, even generative. So ChatGPT, we are capable of generating new content that is realistic but not real. But the point that we have in common in all these kind of models that we can create today is that we are in a paradigm shift nowadays. So this system that they were considered only as technical system until 20 years ago, nowadays they are not anymore only technical system, but they are socio-technical system. Why? Because the society comes into play, because we take these application, this AI system, and we use them on the society. So these kind of system have an impact on our lives, and if something goes wrong, it happens that the impact is on us. So the society becomes a variable in the AI system, and should be engineered since it becomes really a variable in the AI system. Just one point of reflection. Let's take a look at the data that we use for training these AI models, because the common path that we have in all the kind of model that we can create is that actually we collect a lot of data and we learn from the data and we reiterate the decision that we made in the past accordingly to the data that are describing the specific situation, okay? So in this picture, and here you have the source of this picture that actually is a very nice paper that I suggest you to read if you didn't heard about this. In this picture, we can see where the data that we use for training the model comes from. And as you can see, this is how AI, from the perspective of data, sees the world. And this is impressive because you see for the AI, it exists a very big, huge America, and some countries completely disappear. So it means that we are representing this inside the AI, and we are, as my colleague said before, amplifying the scale of this kind of discrimination. So the main issue that we have here today is an issue of trust, related to trust. So how can I trust an AI system if what I presented so far is true and it is happening? So how can I put decision or asking the AI system to support my decision if I know that this stuff can happen? So we need to generate trust. And to generate trust, first of all, we need to have an approach that go through policies and legislation. And actually, I'm very happy to say that here in Europe, we made a long journey for the legislation. So they started in 2018 with the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, where they drafted a requirement for having trustworthy AI, and now we have the AI Act that, even if it is not perfect, it is at least a regulation and something where we can start from. Of course, the regulation is really, really high level, so we need to, as engineer, as person that would like to test what is happening in an AI system, we need to provide concrete solutions. So what can we do? We can do we believe, experimentation environment. This is what we made actually in the Equitas project. And in the Equitas project, we built really this holistic methodology starting from the high-level requirement of the AI Act, and we grounded the high-level requirement into technical tests that we can perform when we have to deal with an AI system that has an impact on the society. Or technical methods that we can apply even at the level of the design of an AI system to have the so-called fairness by design. So Equitas provide this holistic and comprehensive methodology, and the first point that I want to stress here is that the methodology is interdisciplinary. So this is a work that cannot be done as computer scientists alone, but at least we need to put together three different perspectives: the social one, the legal, and the technical. And how can we make it? Via participatory design. So we really define the methodology that grounds each step that should be considered for designing a fair AI system, and the main pillar of the methodology is this participatory design. Then once we put in place...
Just to say, there's just a few minutes left.
Yes, thank you. I will wrap up. Thank you so much. Once we put in place this methodology, we are able to create the so-called socio-technical graph that put together the context of an AI system and is capable to assess your AI system against the given context. Because, for instance, what we consider fair in the healthcare domain is completely different with respect to what we consider fair, for instance, in the hiring domain. So we created this socio-technical context, and then we are able to make experiment in our environment. In this slide, I just want to show you the methodology is very, very complex, okay? So I'm not going into the detail of the methodology that we draw, but what I want to highlight here is that you see the main important point is to have a participatory approach. So it means that all the person that will be affected by the decision of the AI system should be sit around the table while you take the decision on how to design the AI system itself. Okay, so the computer scientist cannot act alone and say, okay, I will put this weight or whatever. Okay. So we need to work together. Here, just some screenshots to show how you can reify the different requirements of the AI Act, but not going into the detail here. Just a couple of examples that I want to bring. This was one of the use cases that we had in Equitas related to the hiring domain. In this example, we have a company in the consortium that brought an AI system that they use in their company for matching curricula and job posting. Okay, if you analyze the data, you can already see that, for instance, some jobs are associated only to male, while other jobs are associated only to female. So what is going to learn my AI system? That, for instance, a female cannot be a mechanic. Okay, so this is unacceptable. And of course, inside the environment, you can mitigate it. Last very quick example, it is another use case that we have in the consortium that is related to skin disease prediction on kids. We are working with the hospital in this case. And in this case, we are working for predicting very rare disease that can happen on the skin of the kids. So if we are completely unaware of all the stuff that I told you so far, and we train an AI system out of the picture that the doctor provided to us, these are the results. A very good accuracy on light skin tone and a very bad accuracy on dark skin tone. Why? Because the hospital is in Italy. So in Italy, we have a majority of Caucasian skin, the stuff of the data that I was mentioning before. So what can we do here? Here we did a work exploiting generative AI actually for generating realistic but not real image for darker skin tone. And this work was very interesting and actually very effective. And here we worked with co-design and co-validation with the doctors. Why? Because, for instance, the same disease on a darker skin tone can show in a completely different way with respect to the white skin tone. So if we train the model, the generative model, unaware of this, we can have a lot of mistakes. This is just to show that after this work, we increased also the accuracy on darker skin tone. So my final message is that, of course, we need this kind of tool for experimenting fairness, but we really need to work all together for making this happen.
Thanks so much, Roberta. Really curious to dig into that, especially how we incentivize tool developers to actually go through processes like this, especially if it is multi-stakeholder engagement that's required, which obviously takes a lot of time to do well. But I will invite EM who is our final speaker, to share their slides, and then we can come back to questions at the end. So EM Lewis-John is joining us from Mozilla's Common Voice, and we'll be talking about linguistic underrepresentation in AI training data and practical steps that can be taken to overcome this issue. So really picking up on something that Roberta also mentioned about the training data sets that are being used to power the largest language models and the most popular LLMs that we're currently using. But over to you, EM.
Hi, everyone. I was just 2 minutes late, which means that I missed camera, mic, etc. checks. Can everybody see what looks like the right screen and hear my voice clearly? Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay, well, it's great to be with you all, and I've loved the talk so far. I have lots of questions too. So I'll be talking a little bit about linguistic inclusion and taking you through sort of the state of play on that kind of technology. So firstly, just to kind of step back for a moment, why does language matter as a vector of diversity? And I think there's two things I want to pull out. And the first one is that when AI operates and when technology is operational in just a handful of languages, it does shut people out of tech participation. But the next thing is that there's also a kind of really vicious cycle that we enter, where because technologies are only available in a few languages, people use their mother tongues less and less. So you have intergenerationally just this loss of language, which is also a loss of heritage. So we see that really, really clearly. Experts estimate that it's anywhere between 40 to 40 days. Every 14 to 40 days, we actually lose a language permanently. And the sort of bitter irony of this is actually that the technology could be part of the solution for preserving and revitalizing languages, and at the moment is very often exactly the opposite, which feels like a massive own goal for technology. So people sometimes ask how multilingual is AI, and the answer is really that it slightly depends on which types of models we're talking about. So translation is often the one that people would have gone to first when thinking about language technologies. And that's probably anywhere up to a sort of 100 or so translation languages that are well supported within something like Google Translate. And you can see that's all the way back from kind of 2004. More recently, we see ASR, TTS, which is text-to-speech, and LLMs, and you can see that we've got anywhere up to kind of 250 languages being represented. Now, this group probably knows exactly how many languages there are in the world, but sometimes when I talk to people, actually, there is an underestimate in terms of what it looks like, and it's about 7,000 languages in the world, so 250, whilst a significant improvement on 0, is still nowhere near making a dent in the kind of great linguistic heritage that we have around the world. And that does not account for different variants and dialects of particular languages, doesn't account for different accents, etc. So when you really think about it, you see the huge scale of the challenge. So another thing that I wanted to point out that I think a couple of other people have mentioned as well is that there's a lot of focus and work on language and improving language representation, but obviously language is not culture. So this is something that someone said to me not long after I joined Common Voice about 4.5 years ago, actually, and it really stuck with me, which is, if I can have American ideas pushed at me in 100 languages, is that progress? And it hit me really hard at the time, because I think a lot of the tools that we use to try and improve these technologies are really focused on a kind of monodimensional view of multilingualism that I think is really a hard problem to solve. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons that it's hard. So the internet is, as my colleague there mentioned, the primary battleground for training data. So if you take something like Common Crawl, you have this extremely overrepresentative situation with English, 44% of HTML documents in English, which is just staggering when we think back to that 7,000 number that I gave us earlier. And then a few organizations only really are the ones training foundational models. So if you look at that list of companies there, one of the things that you might notice is that they're all Western companies, right? So there are lots of regional actors who are doing really interesting work all over the world to try and think about how to make sure the languages show up in AI, but actually training from scratch, even where the data available, is extremely expensive. And so more and more what we see is people fine-tuning an existing model, but using data of their own. Now, that partly helps to solve a problem because then they can make the model more multilingual, but it's really difficult to correct for the cultural assumptions in the base model. So one of the big challenges is data. One of the things that is taken for granted sometimes in English is the huge availability of public domain text. So that's everything from text on Wikipedia, books that were published more than 100 years ago. There are lots of different ways that text might enter into the public domain, and it just doesn't exist for lots of other languages. Another problem is non-standardized orthographies. Again, for lots of languages, they may not even have a single standardized orthographical system, aka a writing system. The financial resources to process data at scale are obviously enormous, engineering and data expertise. There is another thing that I think is a little bit more, it's a little bit less talked about, but a lot of the tooling that we actually use to unlock the value in text corpora is really, a lot of these starting assumptions in it are English assumptions about how languages like English work. So even things like tokenizers that we use to, if you like, chop up large bodies of text into tokens, they just don't work very well for a lot of different languages because the grammar is so different, because the assumptions within the linguistic structure are so different. There's a lot of uncertainty around data governance as well, a little bit of confusion about what is and isn't allowed on sharing data and for what kinds of purposes. So one of the projects that I look after within the context of Mozilla is Common Voice, which is a multilingual crowdsourcing platform. Essentially, it's an open source piece of infrastructure for communities to collect data in their own languages. And what that process looks like is really, really different between different language communities, because we have high resource languages like French, and we also have really, really underserved language communities like Bukasadong. And so one of them might be shooting for 5,000 hours, and one of them might be working really hard to get 5 hours because there are only a handful of speakers still around. So it's a really, it's a diversity of experiences in actually creating this data. I'm just going to get a time check. Alex, how long do I have?
I'd say about 4 minutes.
Perfect. And then the other project that I look after within Mozilla, which is newer, is called Mozilla Data Collective. And that's essentially a sister platform for Common Voice, which allows people to share other data sets that they already have. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how gender kind of intersects with some of these issues. So we ran a project for Kiswahili a couple of years ago where we had 3 Kiswahili fellows who worked specifically for almost 3 years to create the Kiswahili Common Voice corpus. So this quote here is from one of them, Rebecca, which is that gender is not an add-on when it comes to building systems. It needs to be thought through, integrated, and weaved in. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what that looked like in that situation. So all the way through the data lifecycle, gender had to be considered as a very specific thing. So at use case identification, it meant very specifically going to women's groups, going to women's church groups, going to town halls that had particular women's components and saying, what do you actually want AI to do for you? And often it was not the same things that we were hearing in other spaces. So actually calling that out right from the beginning, what do you want? How is it different? How is it the same? At the dataset design phase, even trying to understand how particular ways of speaking might be different in different contexts. How is your register different when you're speaking with your female friends? How is it different when you're speaking with your mother-in-law? Is it different? At the text collection stage, we actually ran a feminist write-a-thon where we gathered women who had written feminist poetry, feminist stories, and got them to come together, because one of the issues when you access public domain text is that things written 100 years ago are, they have a lot of, they say things that we might not want to say anymore. And so we had to really aggressively counter that. So we had to go and find people who were writing counter narratives, who were trying to portray the experience of themselves and the people around them in that light. So it was all the way actually encoding people's lived experiences. So we did feminist write-a-thons, etc., to try and bring out this narrative, because as we say, it's not just about the language itself, it's also about what's being said in that language. And then for the data collection phase, again, we had to think about how do we make sure that women feel safe to come and give their voice in voice donation contexts. We had to do things that were different in other contexts. For example, it might be that ownership of a device was seen as very threatening in some communities for a woman. For a woman to have her own phone might be seen as unacceptable. For them to have access to the funding resources to go and get their own airtime might be seen as inappropriate. So there were just different considerations for making sure that people had a device that they could safely contribute on. And then for the dataset release and iteration process, we had to go through a different listening exercise to figure out whether or not the dataset was actually serving the purpose we intended. We found when we went through validation for clips that it was more common for some of our languages that women's voices, when they were being validated, they were more likely to be marked down than a man's voice, contributing with the same sort of error rate. So these were things that we had to do specific education moments about, like, this is no more correct than this is no less correct than this. And then, yeah, just excited to hear everybody's questions.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And I guess I just want to encourage everyone to either raise their hand if you want to ask a question directly, or post a question in the chat and I can articulate it to the speakers. But I'll get us started with, I guess, something that I think all of you can kind of reflect on based on what you've presented today. I think your different talks speak to quite different potential governance levers, or who is kind of in charge of making design decisions about AI systems, whether it's more participatory and community-led, whether it's something that should sit at an organizational implementation level, whether it's something that needs to be more kind of compliance based on regulators. And I guess I wanted to understand from your perspectives and your work where you think any kind of conflicts between the potential kind of governance preferences of those different layers should be resolved. And if you think that ultimately one should take precedence over any of the others. Hopefully that's clear. I'm sure it's not a very easy question. It's something that the whole world is grappling with at the moment, but based on what you've presented, would really be curious to hear what you have to say. Maybe if I can come to Taha first, then Roberta and Ian.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, very good question. Hard to answer though. Well, speaking based on the work I presented, because then I talked to people in private sector, the ones who provide the services, and I have talked to people who completely were shocked to see that, oh, for example, assigning a female voice or female gender to AI could be counterproductive. And at least the first interactions were very positive in the sense that, oh, okay, we can fix this. We don't have to do this. The assumption is that female AI is more approachable, is easier to work with, is more marketable. The evidence for that is very thin and contradictory. So I think first thing first, we really need more evidence, more studies, and challenge those assumptions. We need to challenge those assumptions. Of course, then within the sectors, there are different incentives, I guess. There might be companies that could be informed that this is not good for the society, but it helps you sell more products. And there is the real problem, and that's where regulation and policy making should come in. And for example, in my ideal world, there is a law prohibiting companies from anthropomorphizing the AI or giving any human like feature identity, because they're not human. Let's not forget, AI is not really human. So there might be, in my ideal world, there is a law prohibiting companies from selling their products as human or in human-like shapes or forms, unless it's absolutely necessary, for example, in healthcare you want to build the robots to support patients in a hospital, maybe research suggests that their gender could be helpful. But again, we need that research too.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really interesting where that kind of decision lies about whether it's the patient who might get to decide a gender or whether, again, it's at all appropriate to gender our AI systems. Roberta, can I ask you to reflect on the same question?
Yes, Alex. Yeah, thank you so much. So, first of all, I tend to agree with what Ta said. But I would like also to move on a different level. So first of all, also in our methodology, we put a block specifically for the governance part, because as you said, governance is essential. So who is going to decide at the end how to decide how to design this AI system, and how can we solve conflicts? Since we would like to adopt a participatory approach, it is for sure a matter of fact that conflicts will arise. So in our methodology, we put a specific point related to this and related to the conflict that may arise. At the end of the day, however, for instance, in a company, we will have some person that will be in charge of making a decision. But the important point here is that if we want to be compliant with the legislation, we cannot just make this decision and hide this in our technology, but we should make this decision clear. So explainability is also a requirement for trustworthy AI, and we need to explain and to say how we designed the AI system. And the second point that is important that we pay attention at is that technology is never neutral. Okay, so there is a political choice that is made, and then we can develop something accordingly to the political choice that we are doing. Okay, so the technology cannot be neutral. Okay, this is something that really cannot be done. So we need to think together what we want to achieve, and then we can enforce the policy inside the technology. With respect to the second point that I mentioned, so for instance, in the healthcare domain, I would like to have an AI that is a female AI. Yes and no is my answer, because I really would like to make the people aware that AI is not human. So I'm really kind of against giving this humanization to AI. So we can have AI system in hospital that can help doctors, for instance, making them aware of some stuff that maybe they didn't notice, rare disease that maybe they are not able to recognize, but as a support that is always only a technology. So we really need to dehumanize it, because AI is not something that can be human. Okay, so I would say that empathy is not for them.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree, but then things are changing very quickly. Who knows? EM, I guess just bringing you in to maybe think more about the kind of community governance perspective and whether it's even possible given the kind of existing power dynamics in the kind of technology sector.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I mean, we worked backwards from basically this question, like whose voice is not being heard at the moment, and we found that it was people's data, people whose language and culture and heritage it actually were very often not part of the conversation about exactly how they would be participating in these new systems. And so with Common Voice, I think it is absolutely possible to engage the community in very hard conversations about how they want to make use of, participate in AI, but it's hard, and therefore people often just don't do it. And a lot of the things required, quote unquote, don't scale very well, like having open office hours, like supporting multiple platforms, because different platforms are not accessible in every country around the world. So we maintain 5 different platforms so that we have at least a fighting chance of more communities being able to reach us. We delegate a lot to communities because there's no way that we can speak 300 languages. And so the communities also self-organize and self-moderate in separate spaces. So I would say it's absolutely possible to engage around it. When in doubt, we have always taken the view that communities know what's best for themselves, and we in general lean into that direction, even if it means flying in the face of maybe more formal structures. So to give you an example, if a language community wants to join Common Voice under a particular nomenclature or moniker, or if they want to separate out into multiple language communities, even if that doesn't follow the received wisdom amongst linguists, we will generally find in favor of the communities themselves who want to organize in that way, and that's a design choice.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving that kind of practical example. I just want to check if there's anyone who wants to come in with a question, please raise your hand. I can see there's nothing in the chat, but I'll just give a chance for anyone to raise their hand. Oh, yeah, of course, Vita, come in.
If there's nobody else, I really have a question that, for the three of you. And what we have seen today is that AI is propagating our biases, and that when we interface with AI, we reinforce these biases. So seems that there is really a negative loop for which these biases will persist forever, will be even amplified. And what EM said is that there are cultural biases that are inside the languages on which our AIs are trained that will be perpetrated. So there is the hope maybe that if we unbias our AI systems, then we will break this cycle. But my question is, can we do even something more? Can we design our AI to reveal biases, to make us aware that we are in the loop? And is this maybe a way to let even people start to understand the biases more, because sometimes they go unnoticed? Is this a direction that we should pursue?
Maybe we go in reverse order.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that what we're doing?
To be fair,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly, to be fair. I can share, I think, just maybe one thought on this, and then I can't wait to hear what everybody else has to say. So I think the trouble is that we as a society of human creatures have not decided what we think constitute biases that need revealing and not revealing are, and therefore it's hard to say how we would outsource that hard labor to machines. You know, we as cultures and societies are already having hard, painful, and not having them well, arguably, conversations about what constitutes bias and what constitutes legitimate concern. And until we have figured out where we want to draw the lines around some of those hard things, I see no way for us to make that the problem of algorithms. But I would love to be wrong, because I love to think that we can solve some of these problems with technology. Roberta.
Yes, no, you are right. Actually, you are right, but I tend to be optimistic. So I think that there is something that we can do, and indeed, AI literacy is something that we need to push for. So we need to do more of this. We need to talk to the society. We need to say that AI is not only ChatGPT, that ChatGPT is performing discrimination, that if we go on that path, maybe this is not the path that we want, because the decision will be taken on us as a society. So this is something that I guess that we have the responsibility to do also, to make citizen aware of what is happening and what can happen if we do not use AI in a responsible way. And also I think that we start having also tools like Equitas, but this is not the only one, that are capable really of showing what are the biases that can be hidden in an AI system. What I think that is something that we cannot do is to build an unbiased AI, because this is impossible. So as I was stressing before, the technology will have some sort of political choices underpinning the technology itself. So it cannot be neutral in every kind of context or scenario, or in any place I use the technology. This is another point that we need to understand very well. So each technology has boundaries. So these experimentation environment, stressing environments are useful also for this, because they can make you understand what are the boundaries of your AI system. So, okay, you can use this application if your data is like this, but if you move the context, if you use this application not in Italy but in South Africa, you will have completely different results and possibly any other kind of discrimination. So we can do something. I want to be optimistic, and I'm also an engineer, so I think that we need to construct stuff for solving problems. So yes, I think, Vito, that there is something that we can do. Of course, we cannot solve everything, but this is a starting point.
I agree. Just wanted to add one thing though. Yes, I agree the problem is with humans. AI is reflecting and they cannot be unbiased as long as we are biased. One thing that is interesting here though is that there is a paradigm now studying AI to understand more about the underlying data and to understand about the underlying humans behind those data. Let's say when Grok says anti-Semitic things, of course the focus is on Grok, Elon Musk thing. And then on Elon Musk, little is spoken that, well, there is a huge amount of anti-Semitic content on the web, and these algorithms merely learn from those contents. Why not trying to tackle that problem at a sort of deeper level? So I think there is a chance here for us also to understand more about ourselves by looking at the behavior of these machines who learn from us. Yet there is a huge effort now also to do alignment, to sort of polish or fix the problem at the surface, which I think is very important from product point of view. But from research point of view, I'm worried that this sort of things, that the shiny surface that we put on language models takes away the chance of understanding the major problem that are there, which are reflections of major problems in our human societies.
Thank you all. I can see that we're over time, so I'll just wrap up. But I guess some of your reflections there also made me think about the lack of universality of what the kind of right choices are here. So I think that's another challenge that we need to be kind of thinking to address. And also one of the things that my team's been doing recently is talking to members of the public, how they feel about AI systems being used in kind of more everyday kind of purposes when they're interacting with streaming services versus being used in kind of more high-risk scenarios, such as the delivery of public services. And throughout those conversations, I've been quite surprised to hear people really reflecting on this need for criticality in their own use of these technologies, and having kind of better awareness of their limits. They don't want the technology to be shut off, but they also don't think that that's possible. But having better kind of understanding of, as Roberta was saying, where the limits of these technologies lie, is something that has kind of been standing out in those public conversations, at least. And I think from everything that we've heard today, I'm kind of hopeful, because at least we are trying to measure the exact impact of these biases, whether they're just kind of reflecting our own patterns, or trying to exacerbate them, or not trying to, but like managing to exacerbate some of these negative patterns. also having kind of very technical solutions that are trying to align with regulation, and I guess also practical solutions which try and bring kind of power back into the hands of people who might be impacted most by either the use or the absence or the kind of development of this technology. So you have given us something to be hopeful for, I think. And I don't know, Vito, if this is the last planned seminar or if there are others coming up, but I'll just leave the last word to you in case there are.
Thanks, Alex. There is another one in which we will deal about the collective intelligence, hybrid collective intelligence for medical diagnostics. It will be in November. And so stay tuned. And thanks a lot, Ian, Ta, Roberta, for your contribution. It was
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you.
Thanks to you, really.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.